Hello, welcome to St Andrew's Church here in Middleton in North Yorkshire. We're here to have a look at the unique Viking grave markers inside the church here, and they're important because they tell us a little bit about Viking society up here in the Viking Danelaw in the north of England. They also depict particular Viking artistic styles from the period. Perhaps most importantly, they give us a bit of an insight into Viking belief systems of the time as they were transitioning from the pre-Christian Norse pantheon of gods and mythic stories through to the Christian monotheistic religion and how they combined the two. My name is Chris, this is Church Searcher, and I'll see you after the map. Now, a place name, Middleton, is quite an easy one to translate. Ton being Old English, Anglo-Saxon for farm or settlement. So Middleton here was the middle farm or settlement in probably a group of villages around here. And the tower behind me here is Anglian, from the Anglo-Saxon period. And you can see on top of the Anglian Tower there's been the belfry added late in the 12th century. On the corners you have the classic Anglo-Saxon long and short work, where they have these huge blocks which add strength to the tower so they could go higher, and you see that a lot in Anglo-Saxon stone architecture. So the Anglo-Saxon doorway in the arch there is dated no later than 1042. So the tower could be from that period or a little bit earlier, and it's bisected, as you can see, by this kind of pointed oval shaped window. This is called a vesica, and you see this quite a lot in early Christian architecture. This one is from the 12th century, and the word vesica is from the Latin word for fish's bladder, which is the same shape. Now interestingly, vesica piscina is the Latin for the early Christian fish symbol that we know as ichthus in Greek, pretty much the same shape. Now above the door and the window is this Anglian cross. This dates from the 8th century, so sometime in the 700s. Now it's the grave markers that are inside the church that were also found preserved within the fabric of the church, just like the cross there. And they've since been recovered and they're now displayed inside the church. So obviously the interior of the church has been modified and expanded over the centuries since the Anglian Tower was built. The nave here and the northern aisle was added on in the 1130s, and then the southern aisle later in the 12th century. And you can see they've both got these rounded Norman Romanesque arches all the way along, and it's in the northern aisle where the Viking grave markers are on display. So the crosses inside the church here have all been dated to the 900s AD. To put that into context, it was in 597 AD that St Paulinus baptised King Edwin in York. We explored that in my video on Gudmundham, which you can see here. It was later, 793 AD, that the Vikings came across the North Sea and raided Holy Island, Lindisfarne. And it was over the decades after that that they went a Viking every summer, raiding the coast of northern England here, Whitby Abbey and a lot of the other communities around here. It was in 867 that the kingdom of Jorvik was founded in York and around this area. That lasted right the way through into the 900s when these crosses were created. In 927, Athelstan famously sacked Jorvik. He was the Saxon king of Wessex, and it was in 954 that Eric Bloodaxe, the last Viking ruler of Jorvik, was killed, after which the area came under the sway of the Saxons. So the crosses in this assemblage in the church here are known as cross A, B, C, D and E, and they represent a school of masons called the Rydale School. And this is essentially a group of artists or masons creating this work in a particular style. And the crosses and sculptures here are considered to be the work of two particular artists, one a bit more finer work than the other. Now there's also schools in York, there's another group of artisans working out of Brompton near Northallerton, famous for the hogback tombstones, and we'll hopefully see more of these different schools as we travel around the region exploring churches this year. Now the two crosses here, crosses A and B, in the Jelling Style, Viking art, named after a style discovered in a Viking burial in Jelling in Denmark, and it dates to between 880 AD through till about 1000 AD. And in particular it's characterised by these ribbon-like animals, S-shaped animals, usually in profile, but these ones are quite unique. Now these circular crossheads are known as the Rydale crosshead. The holes have been bored or drilled through, and they belie a connection to the Western Isles, to Ireland and Vikings and the Isle of Man, but particularly the Dublin-York connection. On one side of Cross A, we've got what is thought to be a hunting scene. We've got this character here at the top holding a spear, and you can make out on the side there's two sort of animals, maybe a dog or a fox or a wolf here, and another longer animal prowling along there. Its jaws, two eyes on the side, two ears. And at the bottom here we've got a stag or a deer. You can see its horns protruding out, four legs in profile there. So this cross could therefore be commemorating perhaps a hunter buried in the ground here. Now there's another interpretation of this carving here which relates to Ragnarok, the end of the world, as described in the Poetic Edda and the Elder Edda. They were poems written in the 9th century, just 100 years or so before these crosses were erected. And at Ragnarok, various beasts are unleashed, Jormungandr, the world serpent, but also Fenrir, the wolf, and Garm, a beast. So these could possibly be Fenrir and Garm here, and this could be Woden defending himself against them with a spear, and it's Woden who eventually bound them and defeated them at Ragnarok. Also at Ragnarok, it's mentioned in the Poetic Edda that Yggdrasil, the tree of life which rises through the centre of the Viking cosmology, holding it all together, is gnawed at by a deer. So this could be a reference to that, perhaps. Now there's some more references to Ragnarok on stone B. So cross B is probably the most famous of the group. It's known as the Middleton cross, and you can see it's got this depiction of a Viking warrior on it. And it's a bit more of a finer hand than cross A. You can see the knotwork here, and the way that these holes have been quite cleanly bored through. Now, there's many interpretations of this Viking warrior here. You can see they've got the pointed helmet, shield, the gird, spear, scaramax, a particular type of sword used by Vikings and Anglo-Saxons right through to the 10th century. We've got the axe here, knife on the belt. So one interpretation is that it could be a depiction of a Viking warrior actually in their grave with their grave goods. So we've got the gird, spear, shield, pointed helmet, which is definitely a pre-Christian tradition, but which is perhaps being carried on in this amalgamation of the Christian and the pre-Christian. There's another interpretation that perhaps this depicts a Viking lord, a jarl, on their throne or a thrift stool. And you can see there's these kind of pommels on either shoulder there, suggesting that there could be a throne behind him here, extending down, and there's this section down below his feet, which is the bottom of the stool. There's a third interpretation that we should perhaps eschew the idea that this is pre-Christian iconography of artifacts of a warrior, but instead this is directly referring to Christian iconography. And if you look at Ephesians 6:11 onwards, put on the full armour of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. Therefore, put on the full armour of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. Stand firm then, with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. Take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. Now clearly here there's other weapons visible. There's an axe. There isn't really a breastplate of God as mentioned in Ephesians, so perhaps this isn't a direct representation of that passage. But nevertheless, there are parallels here about this apocalyptic warning in Ephesians, and no doubt Christian preachers at the time would draw parallels to the older myths of Ragnarok and the end of the world. So there's a fourth interpretation of this carving here. There was a tradition in Germanic society of wooden coffin burials, not just coffins made of wood, but actually hewn from entire logs. And not far from here in Selby, there are actually 14 of these log coffin burials discovered. So perhaps this is the log coffin depicted around them. But why is this significant? It's thought that perhaps these log coffin burials are linking to Yggdrasil, the tree of life at the centre of the Viking cosmology, which separates Asgard, the halls of the gods up above, from Midgard, Middle-earth, where the humans live, and the underworld, where the goddess Hel reigns, with Nidhogg, this serpent beast which roams around, gnawing at the roots of Yggdrasil, the tree, but also devouring the corpses of humans from Midgard, Middle-earth. Now at Ragnarok, the end of the world, the beasts Garm and Fenrir loosed upon the earth. The serpent Jormungandr also is loosed, causing chaos and tidal waves, eventually to be defeated by Thor. But it's at the very end that the two last humans, Lif and Lifhansir, are saved by Yggdrasil, the tree itself. It opens up and allows them to shelter inside, protecting them from the end of the world, allowing them to repopulate the earth later. And this is actually a bit of a cyclical myth in that the first two humans were created from driftwood found by the gods on the beach. So there's this thought that perhaps these log burials are a direct relation to the idea of Yggdrasil protecting people. In the 9th century, there's a text from East Anglia, which is sort of a Saxon interpretation of the Gospels called the Heliand, and it refers to the cross that Jesus died on as being a tree. And there's this notion of the rood tree in sort of Germanic Christian thought. And this is a clear link to possibly Yggdrasil, the like tree of life at the centre of the Viking universe. So perhaps here we've got a depiction of the Christian rood cross, but it's also the tree of life, sheltering a human in it, keeping it safe from Nidhogg, devouring souls down below. Now, there's another connection on the reverse of this cross, back to Ragnarok, Jormungandr and Nidhogg, shared with cross A, and it's another Jelling beast on the other side. On the reverse of cross B, we've got this Jelling Style serpent, S-shaped and in profile, but its head is actually facing forward. You can see it's got two eyes here, and its jaws are kind of coming out like this possibly, whereas on cross A we've only got one eye, and the jaws are maybe sideways on. So, is this a depiction of the great world serpent Jormungandr? Its bindings are loosed under the sea, and it causes tidal waves to come ashore, ravaging the earth, but finally defeated by Thor. Thor, however, is actually killed in the myth of Ragnarok because the jaws of Jormungandr spew out poison when it dies, killing him. So you can see here that the beast is bound all the way along the body, but the jaws themselves are actually bound here, and it's the same with the beast on cross A. Now, this binding of animals you do see in Jelling art. However, the binding of the jaws of this beast you never see anywhere else in Viking art except for here in the Rydell group. So this is a stylistic choice unique to the artisans working here. Now, is this Jormungandr, or perhaps is it Nidhogg itself? Because Nidhogg, the beast in the underworld that devoured corpses, nibbled at the roots of Yggdrasil, was never defeated or slain by any god, by any hero or warrior in Viking mythology. So perhaps the binding of the beast here to the cross, which also maybe stands as a symbol of the tree of life, Yggdrasil itself, is a symbol that Christian faith is going to keep you safe from your corpse being devoured in the grave here. So cross C is a different style again. Rather than the ring-headed crosses of crosses A and B, this is a hammer-headed cross. There's been suggestions even that this could be representative of Thor's hammer. But whereas the other crosses have the side decoration of interlacing, chain linking, here we've got a fluid vine depicted, and this has a clear association with early Christian iconography of Jesus, stating that he was the true vine and that we, the humans, are the branches. And so any early Christian converts seeing this would probably be able to draw a clear association between Jesus, the true vine, the Saviour, and also all the natural motifs associated with Yggdrasil and the sacred plants and trees of pre-Christian religion. There's even suggestions on the reverse of the cross of perhaps white pigment and red in places as well. So this was perhaps a very colourful cross originally. Now the final two crosses are up here on the windowsill behind me, but they're in much more fragmentary form. Crosses D and E. E here has the head of a Viking warrior, again with the pointed helmet, suggestion of a spear and a sword, and the same on the fragment of Cross D, another pointed helmet. Again, we've got these pommels on the shoulders, which might be a throne or a stool. We've got the axe, the Scaramouch sword, just sticking out down below there, and then the little knife on the belt again. Now, the interesting thing about this carving here is that it has a forked beard. It might even be quite an elaborate one, coming down in 4 strands, 2 from his chin and another 2 from either side there. Now, this leads us to our final little hidden gem here in the church. It's going to take us back into the main body of the church, a bit further forward a few hundred years into the medieval period. So, back up in the chancery here, on either side we've got a pair of 15th century choir stalls. But this seat here is quite unique because this is a medieval misericord that survived, a so-called mercy seat. These were designed for priests and monks who in long services they'd have to stand up for long periods of time, and you would lift the seat carefully here, and that would expose a little stool, the mercy seat, which would allow them to lean back and give a little respite to their aching legs. But you can see underneath the stool, supporting it here with their hands, is this character here with a forked beard, 2 down from the chin, and also these ones extending out from the sides there, not unlike our Viking on the cross shaft. So that kind of brings us full circle here at St Andrew's in Middleton. A unique place, some spectacular Viking artefacts on display here in the church. I don't think there's any really agreed consensus on the meaning of the carvings here in the church, but there's plenty to read online and published works as well if you want to immerse yourself further in lots of the various theories. But until next time, I'll see you soon in the next video. Keep church searching.